So hopefully Eric will be joining us shortly. He is the first speaker up tonight, so we do need to get him on very quickly. So I'll just quickly introduce myself. So as Freddie said, I chair the Digital Inclusion Panel of the WCIT. Some of you, I believe, are aware of the WCIT. For those that aren't, a livery company, the 100th livery company, actually in the City of London. And we have panels that support various things that we're quite passionate about. Obviously, for me, it's about digital inclusion, and it's great to get the opportunity to really collaborate with the BCS on this tonight. Both Freddie and I are actually members of both the WCIT and BCS, and we're both on the Digital Divide Committee and the Digital Inclusion Panel. So it seems natural synergies for this evening. So yeah, we have three speakers tonight. So we have Eric Kilstrom, who I'll be introducing you to shortly. We have Rosie Woodhead, and we also have Gary Hunt. And we also, there's three varying views really. We'll be talking about things from their perspective, what's happening with digital, this increasing move to digital and online services. How is that impacting people from their perspective? What assumptions are we making? What are the challenges? But how can we overcome them? Once they've all had a chance to speak, please feel free throughout each of the talks to submit any questions that you might have, and we'll get round to them. I imagine at the end we'll get round to those, but if it's relevant, then we will speak to them during the course of this call as well. Okay. All right. So
Hi.
So I
you should have an email.
Just wait for Gary to confirm that Eric has joined us.
All right, he's now got the link. Sorry, I'm trying to do things behind the scene.
Okay, no problem. So hopefully just another 30 seconds, if you don't mind just holding on. We'll have Eric on the call and then we can get started. Here we go. Good evening, Eric. Can you hear us okay? And
yes, I can. Thank you very much.
Here you go. Okay. So I'm going to hand you over to Eric then. He's an established innovation professional focused on improving people's healthy life expectancy. He is chair and CEO of Centaur Robotics, who are a startup reimagining mobility for 10% of the global population with restricted mobility. Eric also volunteers as the UK ambassador to Aging 2.0. This is a global network focused on improving the quality of life for older people and Open Age, which is a charity helping older generations. Eric is involved with a variety of innovation projects that focus on overcoming traditional barriers to healthy aging in the UK and abroad. So, Eric, I'm just going to hand over to you just to give us your view, your perspectives on the topic this evening.
Yeah, Sean, and again, for everyone on the line, forgive me for being late. I am a former director of the Government Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund for Healthy Aging, and I come to this this webinar from the perspective that an aging population provides an opportunity, but also challenges of which digital inclusion is part of this. So I'm going to frame it from my particular experience. I had a lot of involvement with bringing people along on the journey. There's some great statistics published by the Office of Communication, Ofcom. They talk about something that is near and dear to WCIT and the panel attendees here today, which is that something like 98% of the UK population have access to the internet on a regular basis. You would think job done, right? I think in the UK there are 116 million mobile subscriptions. There are more mobile subscriptions than there are toothbrushes in the UK. Out of a 65 million population, there's you would think that mobility wouldn't be as pervasive as it is today. And I think the key thing here is how do we bring everyone along? Because another interesting statistic out of Ofcom is that there are 2.5 million people who don't use the internet at all. So how do you square these numbers, right? We've got all of these mobile connections and access. We've got all these devices, yet there's another 2.5 million who are not connected. And how do we bring everyone along? A lot of people have said, "Oh, well, it's an aging population. It's something that we just need to get them to come along, and it'll sort itself out." Well, first, people over 65, over 50, there isn't one segment, right? There's different types. There are people who are digital natives, helped to create the internet, and then there are people who have never used the internet and never will use the internet. And I think a lot of what we need to do today is talk about how we bring everyone along, and that's the key aspect of all of this. So I think there's well, I was going to talk about 5 years ago. I think we were talking about 5 million people who had never used the internet, and I think the pandemic changed the entire landscape. There were a lot of people who transitioned from going online, being offline to going online, but there's still that segment who doesn't. And I think there's some really good research done by the Good Things Foundation, which talks about the reasons why there's a digital divide. Motivation is part of it, skills is a part of it, ability to pay is part of it, access, how does someone get a mobile device? And if they don't do these things, how do you stay connected in today's environment? How do you bank? If you don't have a bank account, how do you get a job? Where do you receive post? Banks are disappearing these days. So I think there's a lot of challenges, and there isn't one thing that solves one solution that solves everything, but we've got to bring everyone along. And I think Sean, what you've assembled here is a panel that has the full scope of spectrum of issues. Really looking forward to what Gary and Rosie and the rest of the panel have to say about how we address all of this. Going digital is important. The government is pushing more and more services online, but how do we bring everyone online and make it all important, that all inclusive? And it just doesn't rely on family or charities to fill the gap. Is that sort of a sufficient overview?
Yes, Eric, thank you very much. It's certainly great. That's one of the perspectives that we're going to be looking at tonight. Okay, so we're going to move on. Okay, we're going to move on to Rosie. So Rosie is an experienced transformation and delivery leader with 30 plus years in the NHS and public sector change, skilled in strategy, execution, service redesign, and digital transformation. Rosie is passionate about coaching teams and improving well-being. She is ambassador to Red Trousers Day charity. It'd be good for you, Rosie, to tell us a little bit more about that, if that's okay. Raising awareness and funds for cancer research. She is also liveryman of the Worshipful Company of Information Technologists, of which you've heard, and professional member of the BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT. So, Rosie, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Sean and Freddie, and what an introduction. And Eric, you've actually built a really good segue into let's talk about healthcare and how we can access our healthcare more effectively and efficiently. And also to add, Sean, I'm also a panel secretary for Medicines and Health for the Worshipful Company of Information Technologists, for WCIT. So if anybody's interested, I can talk about that later on during Q&As perhaps. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the challenges in accessing your primary healthcare services, your GP practices. I want to cover a few things really. The challenges that's faced by patient populations, that's us. How do we access our services? And that's mainly across England. And of course, the challenges faced by GP practices to provide those services to us. But it's quite important to know that patients are the centre of everything, basically. So what are the current online services available that we know of? Well, we know about NHS app, and we've been downloading them in droves, especially during COVID. I'll touch on that in a bit. And of course, our practices will have their websites. Some of them will have extra apps, or there's too many apps around if we think about it. But how can we better utilize these healthcare apps as patients, and what support are we getting from our GP practices? Also, I'm going to touch on a little bit about, you've probably been hearing it in maybe the press or information areas, or other services, about digital triage. Actually, is it digital triage? I'll talk a little bit about what digital triage really is. It's not a computer assessing your health service. It's much more than that. So we need to understand and look at what the current challenges are when we try and access our GP practice. So from a patient's perspective, it's really frustrating. We know there's an 8 a.m. rush when we try and wake up early and try and phone up a practice, and we're often told maybe to call back tomorrow. It's worrying. Will I get an appointment when I need one? And it's also unfair because this model is known as the first come, first serve model, and it doesn't always work. And it's also very, very confusing because things might change, but often communications aren't as fast as they should be. Now, these types of concerns are often reflected from declining patient satisfaction surveys, which refers to the access to general practice. But equally, this first come, first serve model also has many challenges for the practice and their staff, so clinicians and the staff that support them. It carries an increased clinical risk from higher volumes of calls and higher volumes of requests and more complex patient needs as well. Practices and clinicians are not always able to see the demand and plan their workload as effectively as they would like, which leads to being unable to understand their patient needs fully and not being able to prioritize effectively. And dare I say, about the sustainability risk because of increasing demand and challenges. We need more doctors, of course, and the recruitment and retention of staff, and staff burnout. It's a plethora of challenges, shall we say. But these types of challenges are often most acute in practices operating in high areas of deprivation and rural areas, based on a lot of studies. Now, there was some interesting news within the GP contract reforms for this year on patients using online services like online consultations where people submit their requests of queries, etc. Now, this year, on 1st of October this year, all GP practices in England have been told to keep their online consultations tools open during core hours, and it's not being currently the case. There are some practices open it for a couple of hours in the morning, maybe some keep it all day, some keep it 24/7. It's a variety, but the mandate for GP practices is to keep it open from 8 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. so that patients can submit routine non-urgent requests such as requesting for an appointment or a consultation, medication queries, or non-clinical queries such as admin queries. But this mandate has its challenges. Practices need to ensure that patients can contact their practice more digitally throughout the working day, and safeguards need to be put in place as well. So if a practice or a GP practice, any GP practice has a patient charter, which they should have, they need to update that to show what does online consultation mean, how and when can we use this type of thing. The idea behind this is to fix that front door. And, earlier on, I explained about that 8 a.m. phone rush, that first come, first serve approach. This particular mandate is supposed to help alleviate this. But, of course, there are challenges to this particular mandate. Many local medical committees, LMCs as we know them, have been strongly critical and raised a lot of queries and risks around digital inequity and, of course, increased workload. The Health Service Safety Investigations Body, a lot of acronyms today, HSSIB, are concerned about those safety risks and are equally about digital exclusion and inconsistency on how local systems are implemented. Now, how do we tackle some of these access challenges? Well, some practices out there are transforming their processes and enabling their patients to better use their online services. Some are helping and enabling their patients who experience digital exclusion and who can't navigate technology to use either on-site tablets or web-enabled PCs so they can submit their clinical or medical requests, including their admin queries as well, with help from reception staff and admin staff. And some of these practices have privacy rooms, which allow the patient to submit their requests more safely and securely as well, and guide them as well. Now, practices also have, if we're talking about digital, where practices have free Wi-Fi access and available to the patients and other practices. It's been around for about 10 years or more, so that they don't need to wait in the queue. I've also seen practice generate QR codes at entrances or the front door and waiting areas to help reduce those in-person visits and queues. So when the practice is closed, they can, if they are digitally enabled, they can point their phone cameras and actually access the services more easily. And of course, patients are encouraged to download the NHS app that I mentioned earlier on, or use their practice online website for requesting those medical advice, and it's also guided by the staff on how to use this. Now, statistics show that out of the 75% of adults who've downloaded the NHS app, and we've all done it because during COVID, we downloaded the NHS app for our COVID passports, and as well as submitting our COVID tests as well. So since downloading the NHS app, between 20 to 30% will likely use other online services for medical advice or related healthcare queries. And a lot of the online solutions or online consultation solutions integrate really well with the NHS app. Now, this year, or actually, if we look at previous year's data, an estimated number of patient-initiated consultations were about 38 million. There were 38 million patient-initiated consultations were submitted via online consultation systems, whether it be NHS app or the practice's website across England. And this is 2024-25 data that was released earlier on this year. I took a little bit of a deeper dive on that year's data, which shows that more patients are using online consultation systems, which is a rise of about 47% across the year as their practice transitioned into a more digital triage service. Now, I'm going to explain digital triage services. Now, practices that are adopting what is called a digital triage service, it's not really digital triage service. It's in effect a clinically led assessment service. And it's not completely digital, but enabled by a digital system to capture and record those requests when a clinical team assesses and prioritizes those requests. So there's a human behind it, there is a clinician behind it, and then also navigates those patients effectively, whether you need an appointment or further investigations or even some resolutions and advice without even needing to see a clinician. And an admin support team will support the clinicians dealing with those non-medical requests as well. So what about those patients who can't access online services? They are not left behind. The ethos of BCS, we cannot forget, we do not leave people behind. Patients can still access their GP practice by either telephone or visit in person. And I explained on some of the things that what could happen at a lot of practices out there. Some practices have adopted an automated telephone service, which enables the navigation of patients to the right services and also captures their medical requests and then transcribes it in readiness for a clinician to assess and prioritize it. In-person visits will also capture their requests or queries in order for patients to be navigated more effectively, as well as encouraging and enabling them to use online services where it's possible when they next visit. Well, in summary, there's a lot of work still to do within primary care, but what I've experienced with services I've worked so far, they're continually learning to improve and aim. So for patients, The aim is to have better accessibility and improve communication throughout all those contact channels available, including support for digitally excluded community where it's needed. Experience to improve their clinical and medical needs are assessed more swiftly and effectively and appropriately. And then, of course, we can't forget those GP practices who need to provide us those services. They need to ensure that their patient needs are better supported through effectively established clinically led assessments. Take the word digital triage, put it to the side, tell your patients it's more clinically led. So they're not afraid to use these systems. Also, to understand that the online consultations are key enablers that can be better utilised and integrated more effectively, and also build effective and efficient processes that are key to continual improvements and sustainability. And that's all I have to share with you. I hope that's useful and opens up some interesting questions. Back to you, Sean.
Thank you very much, Rosie. I think there was a lot. There's a lot to unpack in that, wasn't there?
Yes.
Some really useful stuff, some really good stats and stuff. I'm sure there'll be some good questions on that later. Certainly, I'll have some questions of my own. But let's see what else comes in. Okay, thank you very much, Rosie. I'm now going to hand you over to our final speaker this evening, who's Gary Hunt. Now, Gary's unusually wide range of activities have developed into a career of more than 50 years in science and business. He has a unique ability to share his knowledge and experience with everyone, and also makes time to work tirelessly in a voluntary capacity for the local community, Institute of Directors, and as a city liveryman of the Worshipful Company of Information Technologists, WCIT for short. He has also been awarded the Queen's Golden Jubilee Medal, now called the BEM, for his work in his local community in 2002. And that is just a snapshot of Gary, his achievements, and what he's he's done in his career. So I'm going to hand over to Gary. Gary, great to get your views on how you see things from your perspective with digital inclusion.
Thank you very much, Sean. As they say, now for something different. And in fact, I'm as a scientist, I look at these things differently. In fact, this is an issue of cause and effect. We've been hearing all about the effects. Let's go back to the beginning and look at the cause of what actually is creating the situation. The world has gone balmy. It's gone totally digital, and it's forcing everybody to go that way. And in fact, the assumptions that have come out of the digital inclusion is that is it suitable for everybody? I don't think it is. Is it an age-related issue? No, it's not. There is a sudden cut-off age where it happens. Is it a personal financial matter? No, it's not a financial matter. And I think we will. Is it possible to create a digital world that we can all work with? Answer: no. And I think that's where I'm taking the completely different approach. Now, if I was viewing this project in any of my roles in the past, I'd be looking at the assumptions. And that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to go through them very carefully. It assumes this digital world in which we're talking about is suitable for everyone. It also assumes that the problem is going to go away as my generation, we ancients, disappear. And as the new lot come in and reach these ages, having grown up in the electronic world, they will react differently. Well, that's a big assumption. They also, and the other problems we've got to consider here very much are the issues, the medical problems, and that's the one which is the real breakneck. It's something that can affect you at all stages through there. That depends on technology. The technology that rapidly changes. We assume that the internet is totally reliable, always going to be there. Wow, isn't that a big assumption? We all got experience of that. And think about cybersecurity and how we assume that we have a secure system. Well, there were 25,000 attempts with cyber hacks within the City of London last year alone. And look, Marks and Spencer's are proudly saying we can do click and collect again now. We haven't been able to do it since Easter. Or you could be a member of the co-op and say, look, you've stolen all the our personal details of all the 6 million members. Should that make you feel happy? So can we trust people with our data that we're now putting on the internet? So, and the other issue that has been assumed, and I'll read out the comment in a second, is that no alternative system is necessary. That's a huge assumption, and it's wrong. Now, in this world that we're moving to, the whole issue of age is worth mentioning. Yes, we are having an ager population, but even today, Leonardo DiCaprio has said, "I'm 50, but I feel like 30." That people don't think about their age. And Michael Hestheimer at the other end of the scale suddenly says, he was asked, what was your best piece of work? And he said, "The best is still to come." There's the whole range. And people that I can actually look up to and say, "Thanks to you, I am here," because I was born in the middle of the Second World War. Winston Churchill was 65 when he became Prime Minister. But think of how you have already categorized those people and what goes on, and take it the other way of the medical challenges we're facing. You could be a rugby international scoring tries at Wembley, like a famous rugby league player, who then suddenly gets motor neurone disease and dies at 41, as Doddy Weir did, the Scottish player as well. So these things can affect you very rapidly. I had a neighbour who fell over recently, has damaged her shoulder, broken her arm, and is unable to do the things otherwise she should do. So medical problems there are a deep-seated factor. And there are people who have limited educational characteristics because of how they were born, their genetic problems. They will never be able to reach these standards. How are we going to accommodate those? So the medical problems are really quite a factor. Finance is only a problem. Really, I'm not sure. But the issue that we're seeing is the issue of technology. Why is it necessary to have these devices changing every few years? I don't change my car every 5 years, but because they upgrade the software, they upgrade the details of the app, suddenly my device is not able to use. So if the NHS app, which is very good, is updated, could I have a system where I can't even access it? So these are factors that we need to think about very carefully. But the whole issue about the reliability of the internet is a problem. My original training was as a mathematician, and we all know that there are statistics, more statistics, and damn lies. And that's what we're getting when we're talking about the internet. Yes, you can write down, say they're everywhere, it works everywhere. Well, I can take you tomorrow down to close to where I live in Dorset. You could never get the internet in there. The whole geography of what takes place is there. You can't put it into space, which is another thing which has been talking about by Tony Blair and such like. That is simply not going to work for 101 reasons, which I could talk about elsewhere. So and furthermore, when things go wrong on your internet, what are you going to do? You can say, "Well, I called the engineer." Well, I did, but one of the senior internet organizations that I service and provide me with my system in Dorset provides a 6-day engineer support for 7 days when your system can go wrong. We aren't thinking carefully about giving the support. I'm lucky I can turn to people who can give me that advice. So we have to worry very much about the reliability of the internet, the total reliability of the internet. It can be destroyed by war. It can be destroyed by ships dragging their anchors. It can be destroyed, as has happened not terribly far from where I live here in Wimbledon, by the electrical engineering just chopping through the cable and then admitting it wasn't them. So you have all these factors have got to be taken into account. But the other problem we need to think about very carefully is the whole issue of cybersecurity. Suddenly all our data is going up and it's going to be locked up, and we've got to trust people in how this is used. But it can be hacked. The program I would urge every one of you to watch is Scam Interceptors on BBC television. That is the program that will show you the real danger, the number of scam calls we get. I'm sure you have one today. I had one yesterday. I can spot them a mile off. And if you watch that program, it's not just elderly people who are being hit. I've seen these scam attempts, which are very nasty, affecting people of all ages. and we have got no way of really protecting them. And one thing that does happen as you get older is you lose some confidence and you get slightly worried. And this is a factor that can be very much considered in these factors today. We've got to make sure that we are really safe and secure, and I don't think we can actually do it. So we can't really trust them. So is there another way of doing it? Well, this has been flagged by a number of people. The Dementia Society, people with the Parkinson's, people in care homes have all said, we've got to be another way of doing it. Now, as a scientist, I like to calibrate what I do. I want to find out how good I'm doing and can I learn from somebody else? So I've looked around the world and spoken to my neighbor, and who is rather important in this. And I looked at Estonia and South Korea. And I think you would agree that they're both well known as being leaders in the digital world. Estonia admits digital inclusion is sort of working, but, and there's a very important but there. They're saying that the internet is not completely reliable. We are concerned about the way technology is working. There are medical problems that are affecting people of all ages. We must have an alternative way of going about it. South Korea is saying the same things. And this morning, I actually spoke to my neighbor, who actually is a South Korean diplomat, who confirmed that. Issues that affect us all. One of my greatest concerns, which I've mentioned to Freddie many times, is the infamous car park, which is how I got involved in all of this. I can take you to 3 car parks in Dorset, about a mile from each other. 2 of them have different apps, and the third one uses the APNR system. There's a fat lot of use if you don't know how to use these things, and they generally don't. And the APNR system always tells me when I get to the end, thank you very much, it's been approved. Sorry, we haven't got any paper to give you a receipt. It's said that for 9 months now, so I think it's worked out. And I've been to the other ones when the internet locally has gone wrong. So these are factors that are starting to worry people a great deal. We need to think very carefully about how we go about this. But the most important thing, and something I bring from my own background as a space scientist, is working with NASA, we had to make some tough decisions. And we do it with the right people. The people only come to meetings if they're adding value. You don't turn up at a meeting because it says chief executive. You're not going to give any value, clear off. And also, we want people in those groups who reflect the age of the people that are being affected. I do not want, I certainly do not want, what I'm seeing out of Whitehall at the moment, the 20 and 30 and 40-year-olds telling me at 83 how I should be doing things. They haven't a clue what it's like to be this age and how you work. So we need to look very carefully at our decision-making process. We should be looking at the groups that are affecting and advising the government at this moment to make sure they're not there because they have a vested interest. We should have, one of the things that I always did in my groups, on boards that I've chaired, in every sort of committee I can think of, I always like to have 1 or 2 people who I know are going to have disagree with some of the things that I want to do. I like that, because that's how you learn. You actually learn more by the things that go wrong, the difficult decisions you have, than the things that always go right. So we've got the wrong people making the decisions, people without the experience, people who are not taking into account the medical problems that affect everybody from the very youngest right the way through. And it can happen overnight. And I think that's something else to bear in mind. Some of you may be saying, well, should be time to pop down the gym or go out for a run. Be careful, because suddenly your body can change. Arthritis can set in. And arthritis is the most serious, most unpleasant thing that can affect anybody. It's affecting my wife at the moment. And these things can happen because people over-exercise and such like. And these are all the spin-offs that are affecting the medical system. So yes, we're living in a digital world. We should be making use of it. I like to make use of it, but I'm very careful how I use it. I use online banking, but not for some certain transactions. And one particular example I would give you, I went to my major bank, which fortunately isn't too far away, and that's a bit balmy the way they moved them around. And it hit a snag. First of all, they spelt my name incorrectly, and it's been there for 101 years. And guess what? They even got my wife's mother's maiden name wrong. These are all facts that were in the system, but in transferring it around for the new digital system, mistakes have been made. So if I tried to make this transaction online, I'd have been thrown off. I would have been blocked while they sort it out. And that would have been nervous, saying, what on earth has happened there? So this is where we need to be very careful how we operate. We need to examine in our businesses, why are we doing that? Why are we closing all the banks in certain places? Why are we making sure that, why are we putting digital systems everywhere and excluding other ways of doing it? We're not viewing the thing properly. The digital world is changing, but it should be an 80-20 setup, 80% 20% doing non-digital, something that everybody can do, whatever age they are, whatever medical state they're in, whatever financial situation they're in.
Okay.
Over to you.
Thank you very much, Gary. I think I'm sure you'll all agree we've got some, very interesting perspectives this evening from our three speakers. I see Eric, I think you've got your hand raised. Over
Yeah,
to
I
you.
know, Sean, you wanted to get the conversation going with some questions, so I wanted to respond. And again, I was a little short in the beginning because I wanted to give time to everyone else. But I think in responding to some of the issues that Gary had mentioned, Gary, you covered a lot of ground in the assumptions, and I'm not going to address all the assumptions in terms of the world going digital. Prior to my career, I did work in the military, and a lot of the secret side of stuff. My understanding right now, Putin and the whole world, the digital side, they haven't gone digital. Their idea of cybersecurity is to stay on paper. There's no cybersecurity threat in certain aspects of what they're doing. So I'm not recommending that we turn around and go that direction in certain of this, but I do want to address, you made a comment in terms of, it's not just older people. 77% of the people who are not connected to the internet and aren't using it are over 65 today. And one of them is my mother-in-law. She refuses to use the internet, but she does access it. Her user interface is my wife. She'll call up and say, "Will you look up so and so on ancestry.com?" So she does access it, but that's because she's got family who are willing to support her on all of this. Then there are people who, again, will never be, for all the reasons that you mentioned, skills, confidence, motivation. There is a place to go to access these things, and that, people, that's the library. Now, if you look at, libraries are more and more becoming digital hubs and access points, but they're only open, Monday to Friday at best. So if you want to do your banking, how do you do that, and how do you get help with that? Or if you're homeless, how do you get access to disability? So there's lots of things, Citizens Advice Bureau. So the government is turning to family and charities for some of these things. But, to your point, is that enough? Even that assumption is faulty. So just wanted to throw a couple of things out there in response to what you had run through.
Can I just add to you, Eric? You're so right. One of my neighbors, I spoke to them today. They're 92. They don't have the internet. So I said, "What do you do?" He says, "I phone my son. He does it for me."
Yeah.
Not everybody has that. I have, like you, very intelligent children who can do things and help me. Should I not be able to sort it out myself? But I think that is the problem. But we've got to make sure there is the alternative ways of doing it. And moving to the digital phone has created enough nightmares as well. And I think that these are all things where people making the decisions are not in the position to understand the decisions they're making. And furthermore, when you define a project, if we designed a spacecraft and we launched it and said, off we go, I wonder where it's disappearing to, it'd be a riot. We know what's going on all the way through. We know every step. We have every ways of checking out what's going on. This whole project is not being managed properly.
But I do want to say one thing that is going right with NHS. You know, Rosie, you were outlining a lot of the path to digital, but bringing people along. You know, if you can't get an online appointment, you can still phone. You can still walk in through the front door.
I think yes, you can. The idea is for those that are digitally aware is to enable and encourage them to actually use those digital services, which allows people who are digitally excluded or, can't navigate digital more effectively, to be able to get through on the phone, for example, people with long-term conditions, to be able to call up to say, I have a regular appointment with my nurse, rather than having to wait 45 minutes just to get through to reception to say, I need to have I need to reschedule my regular appointment with my nurse. That's quite important. And there will be still, it reduces, often I go into practices and I find I'm standing in the queue just to get to say I'm here for a meeting, because it's rude to say hi, I need to push past, because you'll have irate patients, so you have to get into the queue. And I observe the queue and then I note down to say, how can we affect the better utilization of people who are on the front desk to be able to navigate these patients more effectively? Online service, and they've got privacy rooms, they've got PCs there or tablets there, they're not utilizing them, they've just put them in. And sometimes it's changing the mindset of the people who are providing those services to provide a better service. And that's where the bottleneck becomes there. It's not the patient's fault or the member of public's fault who's trying to access this service. Sometimes it's a process issue, and those are the process issues, and that we go in and and review and improve. And by the time I leave primary care services and I've finished a whole range of programs with them, they are running. I mean, you go in and there's no queues, and that's because they're effectively managing those queues more effectively. They're not, they talk about educating patients, but it's not about education, it's about raising awareness with patients. And raising awareness is so important, communicating with those patients and talking to the patients to say, we're going to help you, we're here to help. And they, it takes away that first come first serve model, and that's the target. I think in the last 5 years, that's and even longer, that's been the target, to say, how do we change this model of this first come first serve to make it a little bit more dynamic, so that the patients that need the care, the frail and elderly, the long-term conditions, how do we do that more effectively? And it can be done. It's just simple quick wins just like that. And sometimes that needs to be educated at the provider side, the people who provide that service to the patient population.
Rosie, you could make the wait a lot happier and better if we have a way of choosing the music. I hate the music they put on.
Well, yeah, I think so. And you know what? There's also lots of different encouragement, especially on the telephone systems. Now, there's been a lot of money being put in on actually moving from analog systems to digital phone systems. And some dynamic practices have actually said, actually, if we're putting a digital system in, let's make it a little bit more dynamic, so we can actually ask patients preemptive questions to say, do you need, do you need to talk about your prescriptions, for example, rather than having to wait an hour to get through to somebody to talk about my prescriptions. And it's making that a little bit more dynamic. And remember, digital, from us delivering systems and solutions, it's an enabler. It's not going to fix everything, and we're constantly learning. Just as you said, Gary, we're constantly learning. And I can quote and I've been brought up with this through my parents. There was this great learner in India called Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, and he was given that title of Ocean of Knowledge, which means Vidyasagar means ocean of knowledge. Yeah, he said, "Thanks, guys, for giving me all of this wonderful accolades, but I've got so much more to learn." And that's continual learning. Continual learning results in continual improvement.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rosie. And thank you all the panel speakers as well. I just want to sort of open up really to everybody else that's attending this evening. Feel free to either raise your hand or put something in the chat if you have a question that you might want to ask. I'm interested to know, I mean, obviously listen to Gary talking about assumptions, of which there are many. And actually, I think the conclusion that I think you've come to, Gary, is that, you know, it shouldn't be digitally for everything. I think you're looking at an 80-20 rule, ultimately. 80% digital, 20% alternative options.